4,501 United States forces, not a squad conducting surveillance, not a company providing security, an entire brigade of America's most elite warriors, assembled for the largest drug interdiction operation in modern history. Their target, a massive cartel convoy that had made the fatal mistake of believing their route was secret, their cargo was hidden, and their operation was beyond the reach of American justice. The Sinaloa Cartel had spent 2 years planning what they called Operación Fantasma, the ghost operation. A convoy of 163 vehicles, carrying $15 billion in narcotics, moving through what they believed was an unmonitored corridor deep in the Texas borderlands. The operation represented the cartel's most ambitious smuggling attempt. Enough fentanyl to devastate entire cities, enough cocaine to flood American markets for months, and enough heroin to fuel addiction crises across multiple states. But their most dangerous miscalculation wasn't tactical. It was psychological. The cartel had grown so confident in their ability to evade American law enforcement that they had abandoned the caution that had kept them operational for decades. This convoy moved with military precision, used encrypted communications they believed were unbreakable, and followed routes they thought were beyond American surveillance capabilities. They were catastrophically wrong. For 18 months, American intelligence agencies had been conducting the most comprehensive surveillance operation in the history of the drug war. Every vehicle acquisition was monitored through financial intelligence networks. Every route change was predicted using behavioral analysis algorithms. Every communication was intercepted and decoded by cryptographic specialists. The convoy that believed itself invisible was actually the most watched criminal operation on Earth, tracked by satellites, drones, and human intelligence networks that mapped every aspect of their preparation. The cartel's convoy was impressive by any standard. Armored SUVs carried security teams armed with military-grade weapons stolen from Mexican army depots. Cargo trucks reinforced with steel plating protected the valuable narcotics from interdiction attempts. Communications vehicles maintained encrypted contact with cartel leadership using commercial satellite networks. Scout cars monitored for law enforcement activity, using sophisticated detection equipment. The convoy operated with coordination that rivaled legitimate military logistics operations. But impressive by criminal standards meant nothing when facing 4,501 American forces equipped with technology and training that exceeded anything the cartel could comprehend. The operation to intercept the convoy had been designated Iron Net, a reference to the inescapable containment that would be applied to ensure no drugs, no vehicles, and no personnel could escape. Army Rangers trained in rapid deployment operations. Marine Corps Special Operations teams with expertise in vehicle interdiction. DEA tactical units specializing in large-scale drug seizures. Border Patrol agents with decades of smuggling interdiction experience and FBI SWAT teams equipped for high-risk arrests had been training together for months, creating a unified force capable of surrounding and capturing the convoy without allowing a single escape. The plan was unprecedented in its scope and surgical precision. Rather than destroying the convoy through overwhelming firepower, American forces would capture it intact, preserving the drugs as evidence for prosecutions, the vehicles as proof of criminal enterprise, and the personnel as sources of intelligence that would dismantle cartel networks across multiple continents. This wouldn't just be interdiction, it would be total neutralization of criminal capability through legal means. Intelligence indicated that the convoy was approaching the interdiction zone with maximum cargo loads and full operational personnel. The cartel believed they were entering the safest portion of their route, a stretch of highway where they had conducted previous operations without law enforcement interference. Security protocols were relaxed in anticipation of successful completion. The interdiction zone had been chosen with mathematical precision. A 30-mile stretch of highway surrounded by terrain that offered no escape routes, no alternative paths, no possibility of evasion once American forces revealed themselves. Hills and ridgelines provided observation points for surveillance teams equipped with long-range optics. open fields offered clear movement corridors for rapid deployment forces. Most importantly, the remote location ensured that no innocent civilians would be endangered when the operation commenced. As dawn approached over the Texas borderlands, the convoy continued its advance with mechanical confidence. Radio chatter between convoy commanders was casual and optimistic. Security teams monitored their assigned sectors with routine attention rather than combat alertness. The cartel fighters believed they were approaching the completion of their most successful operation, unaware that it would become their greatest defeat. None of them suspected that 4,501 American forces were already in position, having deployed during the night using insertion methods that left no trace of their presence. Observation posts on every ridgeline monitored the convoy's approach through thermal imaging and high-powered optics. Vehicle checkpoints at strategic choke points were manned by teams ready to block all escape routes. Command posts coordinated the operation through communication networks the cartel couldn't detect or intercept. The trap was perfect in every detail. The convoy was approaching the kill zone with complete confidence, unaware that their every move was being observed, analyzed, and countered by opponents who had turned surveillance and interdiction into precise sciences. At exactly 6:15 hours, the Texas morning exploded into coordinated action as the largest drug interdiction operation in American history commenced. But this wasn't destruction. This was capture. 4,501 U.S. forces revealed themselves simultaneously, surrounding the convoy with overwhelming presence that made resistance suicidal and escape impossible. The surprise was absolute and psychologically devastating. From every direction, American forces emerged from concealment like a professional army materializing from the earth itself. Apache helicopters rose from behind ridgelines, their presence immediately establishing air superiority that eliminated any possibility of aerial escape. Armored vehicles moved into blocking positions at every intersection and choke point, sealing escape routes with mechanical precision that left no gaps in the containment perimeter. But the true shock came from the ground forces themselves. Hundreds of soldiers, Marines, and federal agents appeared along the highway as if they had been invisible moments before. Their weapons were raised in disciplined formation, their positions were perfectly coordinated, and their message was unmistakable. The convoy was completely surrounded, utterly outnumbered, and facing opponents whose capabilities exceeded anything in the criminal world. The convoy's radio frequencies erupted with panicked voices as commanders realized the scope of their predicament. Some tried to coordinate defensive actions, but found their communications jammed by electronic warfare equipment that operated on frequencies they couldn't counter. Others attempted to identify escape routes, but discovered that every possible path was blocked by American forces who had anticipated every contingency. From loudspeakers mounted on armored vehicles, the surrender demand echoed across the Texas countryside in both English and Spanish. This is the United States military and federal law enforcement. You are completely surrounded by overwhelming force. Exit your vehicles immediately with your hands visible and surrender. Any attempt to resist or escape will be met with decisive action. You have 60 seconds to comply. The psychological impact was immediate and crushing. Cartel fighters who had believed themselves untouchable found themselves facing the full might of American military and law enforcement power. These weren't local police who could be intimidated or corrupted. These weren't border agents who could be outgunned through superior numbers. This was an army, a professional, coordinated, overwhelming force that had caught them in a trap from which there was literally no escape. Some convoy vehicles attempted to break through the containment, but these efforts were immediately and decisively countered. Armored SUVs that tried to ram through roadblocks found themselves facing vehicle barriers designed to stop main battle tanks. Cars that attempted to flee cross-country discovered that helicopter teams were tracking their every movement with thermal imaging, ready to force them back onto controlled routes where ground teams could effect capture. The first surrenders came within minutes of the operation's commencement. Convoy drivers, recognizing the hopelessness of their situation, and the overwhelming professional competence of their opponents, began stopping their vehicles and emerging with hands raised in submission. Security team members abandoned their weapons and submitted to arrest rather than face the consequences of armed resistance. Even convoy commanders, trained to fight rather than surrender, recognized that discretion was the only path to survival. But not all cartel fighters were ready to accept defeat without resistance. A core group of security personnel, positioned in the convoy's most heavily armed vehicles, began preparing for what they understood would be a final stand. These were experienced fighters who knew that surrender meant life imprisonment, and they were psychologically prepared to die fighting rather than submit to American justice. The standoff that followed demonstrated the precision, restraint, and psychological sophistication that separated professional military forces from criminal organizations. Rather than simply overwhelming the remaining resistance with superior firepower, American commanders initiated negotiation procedures designed to minimize casualties while ensuring complete mission success and maximum intelligence gathering. Psychological warfare specialists, using advanced communication systems, began broadcasting personalized messages that undermined cartel morale while offering realistic alternatives to violent resistance. Intelligence gathered over months of comprehensive surveillance was used to identify specific individuals by name, personal history, and family connections. The messages were personal, specific, and psychologically devastating to criminal resolve. Miguel Santos, we know about your family in Guadalajara. We know about your mother's cancer treatment and your daughter's quinceañera next month. Surrender now and cooperate with our investigation, and we can ensure your family's protection and your continued ability to support them. The personalized appeals, combined with continuous demonstrations of overwhelming force and professional competence, began systematically breaking down the remaining resistance. One by one, holdout fighters began abandoning their positions and surrendering to American forces. The psychological pressure of facing opponents who knew everything about their personal lives, combined with the tactical hopelessness of their situation, made continued resistance psychologically impossible. Special operations teams, moving with precision that showcased years of training in high-risk arrests, began extracting the most valuable prisoners from the convoy. These weren't random captures. They were surgical extractions of specific individuals whose intelligence value had been predetermined through months of surveillance and analysis. By midday, the transformation was complete and total. Where morning had revealed a confident cartel convoy moving toward what they believed would be their greatest smuggling success, afternoon showed hundreds of prisoners kneeling in organized rows across the Texas highway. 4,501 American forces had achieved the unprecedented, complete capture of the largest drug smuggling operation in history without firing a single shot. The sight was unlike anything in the annals of drug enforcement. 163 vehicles sat motionless under armed guard, their cargo compartments open to reveal the largest drug seizure in American law enforcement history. $15 billion in narcotics lay sorted and methodically cataloged by evidence teams working with scientific precision. But more significantly, over 400 cartel personnel knelt in organized formations, their hands secured with zip-tie restraints, their weapons confiscated, their entire operation completely dismantled. Intelligence teams moved through the prisoners with systematic efficiency, identifying high-value targets whose cooperation could provide unprecedented insights into criminal operations spanning multiple continents. These weren't random arrests. They were strategic captures based on months of surveillance that had identified each individual's specific role, organizational importance, and potential intelligence value. The interrogations began immediately, conducted by specialists trained in advanced techniques that combine psychological analysis with legal incentives. Prisoners who demonstrated cooperation would face significantly reduced sentences through plea agreements. Those who provided actionable intelligence about cartel leadership, financial networks, and operational procedures would receive witness protection for their families and substantial sentence reductions. but those who remained silent would face the full weight of American federal justice. The psychological impact on the prisoners was devastating beyond anything they had experienced. These men had joined the convoy operation because they believed their sophisticated security planning made capture impossible. Now they knelt in American federal custody, facing opponents who had demonstrated surveillance and operational capabilities that exceeded their worst nightmares. The convoy that was supposed to be invisible had been watched from its very inception. The route that was supposed to be secure had been turned into an inescapable trap. But the true victory lay in the intelligence treasure trove being systematically gathered and analyzed. Documents recovered from convoy command vehicles revealed the complete organizational structure of criminal enterprises operating across multiple continents. Communication devices provided direct access to encrypted networks that had previously been beyond law enforcement penetration. Financial records exposed money laundering operations that connected criminal organizations to seemingly legitimate businesses and corrupt government officials. The economic impact was equally devastating to criminal organizations worldwide. The $15 billion in seized narcotics represented far more than lost inventory. It constituted irrefutable proof of criminal enterprise that would support asset forfeiture actions worth hundreds of billions more. Properties, businesses, bank accounts, and investments connected to the cartel would be frozen and eventually seized, destroying the economic foundation that made large-scale drug trafficking profitable. Recovery teams working systematically throughout the convoy discovered innovations in smuggling technology that revealed how sophisticated criminal operations had become. Hidden compartments constructed with precision engineering, communication systems that utilized commercial satellite networks and military-grade encryption, vehicle modifications that incorporated advanced armor plating and electronic countermeasures designed to defeat law enforcement surveillance. But every innovation was now in American hands, being studied by technical specialists who would develop comprehensive countermeasures that would render such techniques useless for future criminal operations. The convoy's capture had provided law enforcement with a complete encyclopedia of current cartel capabilities, allowing authorities to stay decisively ahead of criminal adaptation for years to come. The international implications were immediate and far-reaching. Within hours of the convoy's capture, law enforcement agencies in 23 countries began coordinated operations based on intelligence gathered from the prisoners and physical evidence. Safe houses were raided simultaneously across multiple time zones. Financial networks were systematically dismantled. Supply chains were permanently disrupted. The single operation in Texas had triggered a coordinated cascade of international law enforcement actions. Mexican government officials, many of whom had been completely unaware of the convoy's existence, suddenly found themselves cooperating with American authorities at unprecedented levels. The demonstration that criminal operations could be detected and defeated with such precision made neutrality politically impossible for officials who wanted to remain on the winning side of international law enforcement cooperation. The few cartel members who had managed to avoid capture found themselves operating in a criminal landscape where large-scale operations were no longer viable. Communication networks were comprehensively compromised. Financial systems were exposed and monitored. Supply chains were disrupted and under surveillance. Even the specialized knowledge required to coordinate such complex operations was now in American hands. Other criminal organizations immediately abandoned similar projects after analyzing what had happened to the Sinaloa convoy. Large-scale trafficking operations were canceled. Investment in sophisticated smuggling technology stopped entirely. The international criminal world had learned that American surveillance capabilities made operational secrecy impossible, and American operational capabilities made successful capture inevitable. As the sun set over the Texas highway where the convoy had been captured, the prisoners were being processed through the most comprehensive arrest and evidence-gathering operation in law enforcement history. Each individual would face federal charges that reflected their specific role in the criminal enterprise. Each piece of physical evidence would be analyzed to support prosecutions designed to dismantle entire criminal networks. The convoy that had believed itself untouchable was now literally and figuratively on its knees before the overwhelming power of American justice. The operation that was supposed to be invisible had been watched comprehensively from its very inception. The criminals who thought themselves beyond the reach of law enforcement had been captured with tactical and legal precision that left no possibility of escape. 4,501 U.S. forces had delivered an unmistakable message written in handcuffs, evidence bags, and federal indictments. No criminal operation is too sophisticated. No convoy is too large. No smuggling attempt is beyond the reach of American law enforcement when justice demands action. The cartel's ghost operation had been made completely visible. Their untouchable convoy had been touched decisively by justice. Their criminal empire had been brought to its knees through superior planning, overwhelming force, and unwavering commitment to the rule of law. The drug convoy was captured. The criminals were comprehensively defeated. And the lesson was permanent. Those who wage economic warfare against American communities through industrial-scale drug trafficking will find themselves kneeling in American federal custody, facing justice that is swift, certain, and absolutely inescapable. Total. Complete. Without possibility of escape or resurrection. American justice had spoken with overwhelming authority, and the convoy had fallen to its knees in unconditional surrender.